Valve. Powered by Source Engine. Okay, und damit Glück auf und herzlich willkommen zu Let's Play Half-Life 2 Episode 1 Kommentar der Entwickler. So. Theoretisch. Okay. Das klingt tatsächlich anders. Sollte eigentlich eine VR habe ich nicht. Sollte eigentlich alles in Ordnung sein. Wie viele Kapitel haben wir? 5. Alles klar. Das Problem ist bloß, also ich hoffe, dass die Audiosprache jetzt auf Englisch ist, so wie ich es auch schon in Portal gemacht habe. Und das Problem ist bloß, hier bei Episode 2 weiß ich die Kapitelübergänge nicht so genau, aber what gives. Entwicklerteam von Valve. Ja, das kennen wir ja schon. Gut, machen wir mal los mit Kapitel 1. Half-Life 2.
Welcome to Half-Life
Episode
2,
1.
Episode 1. We received a great deal of positive feedback on the commentary track in The Lost Coast, and so we've included the same feature in this episode. To listen to a commentary node, put your crosshair over the floating commentary symbol and press your Use key. To stop a commentary node, put your crosshair over the rotating node and press the Use key again. Some commentary nodes may take control of the game in order to show something to you. In these cases, simply press your Use key again to stop the commentary. With episodic content, we are hoping to release games much more frequently than has been possible with the monolithic development schedules of the past. Game developers and game customers have been wanting to try this for years. Please let me know what you think after you've had a chance to play this, our latest installment in the ongoing adventures of Gordon Freeman. I can be reached at gayben@valvesoftware.com. Thanks, and have fun.
Okay, Ben.
Tell me, Dr. Freeman, if you can. You have destroyed so much. What is it exactly that you have created? Can you name even one thing? I thought not.
We used an upgrade of the refractonator from Half-Life 2 to make the Vortigaunts warp into the intro. The major difference is that this time we are only refracting pixels that come from the Vortigaunts themselves. We placed a large sheet of refractive geometry in front of each Vortigaunt to achieve this effect.
This intro sequence establishes some important initial pieces of Episode 1's story and setting. Our earlier versions of the intro sequence were heavy on graphic effects and relatively light on storytelling. When we showed those early versions to playtesters, they thought it was cool, but rarely had any idea what was supposed to be happening. We went through several iterations, each time simplifying the editing and tightening up the effects. We eventually arrived at a good middle ground between the sort of psychedelic look we were shooting for and basic comprehension of what was actually taking place.
We'll see about that.
Kein Grund zur Panik. Kapitel 1. Hey, Großer.
Oh my God! Gordon!
Hey, Alex.
I was so worried.
Hey, the gravity gun. Give it to him, dog.
There, Gordon. Dog's happy to see you. I can tell. Okay, dog. Go get the monitor set up so we can check in with my dad. He must be worried sick about us. He was so sure I wouldn't find you here.
The Citadel's really coming apart. I still don't know how we got out of there. The last thing I remember is rain falling. Huge explosion, and then I heard vortigons. Next thing I knew, Dog was digging me out of the rubble. Oh, it's all so strange.
We should...
Alex, come in.
It's my dad.
We've been trying to reach him for hours.
Erste Map.
All he hears that we found you.
Ja, die... Whatever.
Sweetheart, come in.
Players love Dog, so we made sure that he was the first thing you see when you wake up in Episode 1. We also wanted players to get a glimpse of the crippled Citadel. When Dog lifts you out of the rubble, it's one of the few instances in the game when we take control of the player's view. This allowed us to ensure the player's view lingered briefly on the Citadel before Dog set them down.
Okay. Ja, das hatte ich schon mal irgendwo gehört, dass Dog irgendwie so ein Spielerliebling ist.
Since we never take control away from the players, it can be a real pain to get them to notice important environmental events. It's a constant design challenge for us. The Citadel will be erupting in a massive light show that took 10 of us 2 months to orchestrate, and if we're not careful, the player will end up facing the other direction staring at a tire. In this case, to establish that the Citadel is coming apart at the seams, we wanted the player to notice the debris falling off of it. We used a pretty straightforward method here. Alex explicitly mentions the Citadel while pointing at it. Like most of these solutions, it's not foolproof, but it has a high success rate.
Das stimmt allerdings, damit haben sie recht. Manche, vor allem ich, vor allem diejenigen, die das Spiel spielen, ja, wobei, wenn du das Spiel schon kennst, ist nicht so wichtig. Aber ich gucke mich auch meistens erstmal um. Und wenn du dann nicht sowas hast, wo du direkt darauf hingewiesen wirst, naja.
This area was redesigned several times in order to keep the player in this space while Alex delivers some exposition. As much as we hated to do it, the final solution was to have Alex climb out while the player looks for an alternate route. We portray Alex as more athletic and nimble than Gordon, so players shouldn't get too irritated by the fact that she can get to places they can't. Honestly, we're not especially happy with this crutch, but it's a trade-off we sometimes have to make so that we can get Alex out of the way of interesting player challenges.
Okay. Ja, gut, aber ansonsten, ja, es war ja mehr oder weniger die einzige Lösung, die sie hatten. Weil sonst rennst die halt Spieler fort. In den meisten Fällen.
The Citadel is supposed to be a building of unprecedented scale. So out of scale with the rest of the world, in fact, that we couldn't render it without our 3D skybox technology. This technology allows us to build the Citadel as a 1/16th scale model off in an unreachable corner of the map, and seamlessly merge it into the scene. We also use this technology to create the illusion of vast spaces and distant horizons.
Dazu kann ich mal ganz kurz was zeigen. Hold on. Nee, das ist was anderes. There we go. Also einmal hier. Das ist das, was wir jetzt in der Nahaufnahme sehen. Und dann sind eben halt hier solche... das sind diese 3D-Skyboxen, von denen gerade die Rede war. Und die werden dann eben halt so an die Karte ran projiziert. Wie riesig die erste Karte doch auch ist. So, well, anyway... Command. Cheetahs? Ah, yes. Come on. Ich denke auch. Oh, holy crap.
Dad, are you there?
Alex? Alex, come in.
Hold on a sec, there's so much interference. Hey, Doc, give me a hand. Okay. Little to the right. There we go. Hold it there. We got it. Dad.
Alex, where are you? Oh, please, God, tell me you're out of the city.
Well, not quite yet.
What?
But listen, Dad, we found him.
You found Gordon? I don't believe it. But listen, you two have to get out of the city. The Citadel could blow at any moment.
There's no question that it will, I'm afraid. Our remote sensors indicate the process is accelerating toward a dark energy flare. Anyone left in the vicinity will be subjected to energetic events whose effects are beyond my powers of speculation. The ravages to cellular material are unimaginable.
Stop!
Dad?
Oh dear, Eli, I'm sorry, but surely there's no need for undue alarm. Alex is well out of harm's way by now.
Well, actually, we're still at the Citadel.
What? Oh dear, but there's really no time. The core is exceedingly close to collapse. Why, there's no way to get far enough without first... Well, nothing short of a direct intervention in the core could possibly retard the reaction.
You mean going in?
Into the core, yes. But it's far too dangerous to consider. The chamber will be bathed in radiation.
Wait, you do have the hazard suit. If we found a way into the Citadel, it's possible we
Alex, no!
But Dad!
Izzy, talk some sense into her.
I'm sorry, Eli, but I don't see any other way. It would help us evacuate more citizens.
We can do this, Dad.
Okay, Alex, okay, just promise me. Promise me that you won't take a single unnecessary risk.
Promise. I love you.
I love you too, baby. I'll be praying for you.
Don't worry. I'll see you soon. Don't worry. Let's see if we can find a way into the Citadel from somewhere along the rim. Dog, a little help, please?
Right off the bat, we needed to hammer home some story points, reintroduce the cast of characters, and explain the player's immediate goal. It was a pretty intimidating chunk of non-interactive exposition. We generally approach these scenes by writing way too much, and then through constant playtesting, trimming the scene to more manageable levels. But in this case, even after some heroic pruning, the opening scene still felt too long. We ended up splitting the introductory sequence into 3 scenes, separated by some gravity gun puzzle solving, and then a dramatic walk across a crumbling ledge.
Okay. Also ich kann es einerseits verstehen, dass die den Spielern erstmal eine Einführungszeit für die Waffen geben. Vor allem jetzt explizit fürs Gravitron. Das hat jetzt eine sehr lange Waffeneinführungszeit. Allerdings verstehe ich es nicht zwingend. Gut, ja, nee, doch. Half-Life 1, wobei die kam eigentlich in relativ 2 Jahre, hat es glaube ich gedauert, bis Episode 1 released wurde. Aber im Normalfall, wenn du den ersten Teil von Half-Life gespielt, also wenn du Half-Life 2 gespielt hast, brauchst du nicht zwingend erst wieder eine Einführung der Hauptcharaktere. Das verstehe ich jetzt nicht so ganz, aber sie haben es eben halt gut eingebaut, also von daher egal.
When we designed the Half-Life 2 facial system back in 2000, our goal is to get a natural-looking performance at a moderate distance. Given our real-time polygon and texture budgets, we chose fairly reserved or constrained performances over ever having the actors' faces get into a bad-looking or unnatural expression. For Episode 1, we wanted to extend the character's facial system to support more intense performances with a wider range of facial expressions that would hold up better at close range. These facial improvements included increasing the detail around the eyes and mouth, increasing the number of facial shape targets, think of these as movements of muscle groups, by about 50%, rewriting the rules that control how these shapes blend, and increasing the intensity of many of our existing shapes. In addition, we added support for controlling the amplitude of the facial movement for lip sync animation, which let us dampen or amplify the mouth shapes based on the volume or intensity of the dialogue.
Okay. Ja, das ist eben halt so, Animation und so. Oh, that was unfortunate.
Monitor scenes are especially difficult to make interesting, since they tend to involve literally just talking heads. By interweaving critical expository information, like how dangerous the Citadel has become, with some dramatic character interactions between Alex, Eli, and Dr. Kleiner, we were able to convert a potential liability into one of the strongest scenes in the game. A great way to illustrate characters' relationships to each other is to have one of the characters in danger and show the other's reactions to it, which is what this scene is all about.
Okay.
Sometimes we need to keep the player in an area so that we can deliver some critical dialogue or run an important sequence of events. In these cases, we temporarily block the player's path using what we call a gate. These gates generally take the form of some obstacle that can only be removed or opened by some character or event. In this case, the obstacle is a crashed gunship that can only be moved out of the way by Dog. Though the final scene looks pretty straightforward, a lot of care had to be taken to make sure that Dog hit his marks and played his sequences without trampling and damaging the player.
Okay.
Alex travels through much of Episode 1 with the player, and consequently passes through a wider variety of lighting conditions than she did in Half-Life 2. This meant that we had to improve the quality of the lighting algorithms used on Alex to look realistic in any situation, from the eerie hallways of the Citadel to the streets of City 17 at sunset. For this episode, we added a specular lighting term to the shaders used on Alex, which provides a realistic shiny look to her skin, her leather jacket, and even her teeth. In these new lighting calculations, we chose to specifically emphasize bright highlights caused by illumination from grazing angles. This type of lighting, also referred to as rim lighting, is particularly dramatic when coming from low-angle light sources such as this bright sunset. You'll also note that the rim lighting is further enhanced by our high dynamic range post-processing, which causes the specular highlights to bloom in a striking and dramatic fashion. We have found that the move to an episodic development cycle allows us to take advantage of the fast pace of graphics hardware innovation by incrementally adding new features, such as Alex's new lighting techniques, to the source engine with each new episode.
Ja, Beleuchtung und so. Klar, in Half-Life 2 war sie noch nicht so viel mit uns unterwegs. Und jetzt hängt sie uns gefühlt das ganze Spiel an der Backe. Da muss man natürlich, ja. Und, ey, meine Fresse. Und dadurch, dass es hier allein auf die ersten gefühlten 20 Meter im Spiel so viele Kommentare gibt, hat mich das jetzt endgültig überzeugt, dass ich noch einen Half-Life 2 Kommentar der Entwickler mache. Also nicht Half-Life 2 Update, sondern das normale Half-Life 2.
This ledge is a really tricky spot for NPCs to navigate. While we wanted Alex to be able to maneuver dynamically through any complex environment, in certain navigation situations we're faced with a trade-off between flexibility and visual quality. In this particular case, she navigates the ledge with a combination of AI and scripted animations. We've continued to evolve the systems of Half-Life 2 whereby characters move fluidly through dynamic AI and scripted navigation, but ultimately what matters most is how it looks to the player.
Ja gut, die KI entsprechend zu programmieren, dass die das macht, was man soll. Ja, das kann ich mir vorstellen, dass das nicht so einfach ist.
Our games are created by design collectives that we call cabals. When the idea to have you and Alex sit in a van and then have Dog toss it across the gorge was first suggested during a cabal meeting, everyone thought it was funny, and then we moved on to more serious solutions for the gorge crossing. As the design progressed though, we kept coming back to the van idea, and eventually everyone agreed that we should give it a try. Even though the idea was kind of outrageous, it satisfied some key goals we had for the scene. Alex and the player get across the impassable gorge, and Dog is able to play a key role in the mission, while also plausibly getting left behind. There were still some problems to solve though. Attaching animated models to the van was tricky, making sure the van didn't kill the player took some thought, and it took a number of tries before we were able to really illuminate Dog's thinking, as he went from testing his idea with chunks of debris to finally presenting the plan to Alex. Ultimately, we were able to create a scene that solved some tricky game design issues, provided an intimate view of the relationship between Alex and Dog, and delivered a surprising and visceral entrance to the Citadel.
Ja, doch, der Transporter, der kann einen schon töten, wenn man günstig steht.
It's really important to us to create scenes that showcase strong relationships between our characters. The relationship between Alex and Dog seems to be especially satisfying to players.
In the scene leading up to the van toss, we had a bug before the animation was complete, where Dog's head would shake as he looked back at Alex. In a happy accident, his head shook right after she asked him, "You did do the math, right?" In playtests, players thought this was intentional and always laughed. Because of that, we worked it into the animation, and it ended up being a terrific little moment between Dog and Alex.
Okay. Das kann man natürlich auch machen. Den Bug einfach implementieren.
Suggestion. He is a robot. He's done the math.
You did do the math, right?
Also das hier war eigentlich nicht geplant. Das war eigentlich ein Bug, so wenn ich das richtig verstanden habe.
As fast as you can. Go find Dad. We'll catch up. Don't worry. All right. I'll miss you too.
Now, don't worry about me. I'll see you soon.
Na dann, mal wieder dabei.
Brace yourself. Okay, Dog, let's do it. Before I change my... Okay. Careful, hold on. Whoa. Phew. Whew.
Good throw, Dog.
Now go, boy, go on. You'll be fine, just...
Uh-oh. What now? Whoa.
Achterbahn.
Hold on.
Hey.
All right, let's get off before the next ride starts.
Well.
To convey a sense of urgency, we originally designed Alex to nag the player pretty frequently. She'd say things like, "Hurry up and keep moving." Whether or not this created a sense of urgency is debatable, but after about 3 minutes of this, the one thing it definitely did was make the player hate Alex. This was one of the observations that eventually led us to switch Alex from generally leading the players to almost always following. Through playtesting, we discovered that players much preferred to set the pace themselves, and that they especially disliked virtually any hint of bossiness from Alex.
Ja, das stimmt allerdings. Erstens mal, wenn ja die NPCs folgen, ist es sowieso viel besser, weil ob das du beabsichtigt ist oder ob die Entwickler das einfach nicht hinkriegen, egal in welchem Spiel du Guarding Missions hast, wo der NPC vorangeht, wenn du schleichst, bist du zu langsam, wenn du normal läufst, bist du zu schnell, wenn du sprintest sowieso. Ich weiß nicht, warum er die NPC-Geschwindigkeit nicht einfach an die normale Laufgeschwindigkeit vom Spieler anpassen kann. Weil du musst dann immer so hier laufen. Ups, das war falsch rum. Du kannst nicht konstant vorwärts gedrückt halten, weil du sonst den NPC zwangsweise überholst. So, hier kommt ein Ladescreen. Ne, hier. Ich muss mal gucken, wenn ich den Kapitelwechsel verpassen sollte. Dann mache ich einfach die Verabschiedung aus der Folge und in der nächsten Folge starte ich dann einfach das Kapitel nochmal neu.
We populate our environments with spots where players can take a break to look out over an expanse of cool scenery. We call these vistas. This particular vista was designed to give anyone familiar with the Citadel interior from Half-Life 2 a good view of what it looks like now that everything's falling apart. The pods that are sliding off their track and into the abyss really sell the idea that the Citadel is half abandoned and in chaos.
Stimmt, du hast tatsächlich auch in Half-Life 2 mehrere solche Aussichtspunkte. Das ist an und für sich gar keine so dumme Idee. Da kann man nämlich auch erstmal die Geschwindigkeit rausnehmen.
In an early version of this map, Alex led the player through the whole thing. To make Alex seem less omniscient, we had her access a console here to get her bearings. It exploded, which helped drive home the point that the Citadel was in bad shape, but generally, it was a long pause in the action without a lot of payoff. After we made the high-level decision to have Alex follow the player, this entire scene became irrelevant, and we happily cut the whole thing.
So, und einfach nur, weil ich weiß, dass mich OBS gerade verarscht. Nein, er nimmt den Mikrofon ja dir auf. Gut. Okay, ja, na klar, das ist eben halt sowas, wenn du mit NPCs interagieren musst.
Training is one of the fundamental tenets of our design philosophy. Before the player is required to utilize some new game mechanic, or new weapon, or face a new monster under pressure in a dangerous situation, we always introduce the concept in a relatively calm, but ideally still entertaining way. This entire scene teaches the player that Alex can convert roller mines so that they can be used as a friendly weapon. Later, the player is required to do this in more pressing circumstances, but at this point, everything's still pretty calm. In the original design, the player retrieved the roller mine from a dispenser and used it to take out a Combine soldier who was holding the field from the other side. Eventually, we scrapped that idea and combined the roller mine training with some stalker exposition that originally occurred in a separate scene.
Okay. Aber die Trainingsidee ist auch ziemlich gut. Ja, das ist wie mit den Einführungszeiten für neue Waffen.
In a good puzzle, the player is presented with an overall goal, and then faces a number of smaller challenges in pursuit of that goal. In the case of the Stalker puzzle, we start with, how do I open the door? From there, we move to, how do I get to the Stalker? Then, how do I get to the roller mines? How do I get the roller mine back to Alex? And finally, how do I use the roller mine to disable the Stalker?
Habe ich es eigentlich beim letzten Mal geschafft, den hier in den Schacht runterzuschieben? Passt. Thanks. Alright. Wow. Hold on. Das sehe ich ja jetzt erst. Das hier ist so... Ich wusste gar nicht, dass man hier hochkommt. Das ist so eine Transportkapsel, wie die an die Trägerschiffe dranhängen. Und außerdem... Das hier sieht auch sehr stark nach... nach Portal aus. Diese ganzen Transportröhren und alles. Die fallen hier einfach ins Bodenlose. Get fucked! Du bleibst hier. Eine brauche ich. Ja, Arschgeigen. Arschgeigen, habe ich gesagt. Ach guck, die Transportminen fallen dort in diesen die Rollerminen fallen dort in den Transportpod rein. Yes.
Oh, you found one. Dad taught me how to reset the targeting system on these things. A little extra juice in the right spot, and it's on our side. I'll hold it out where I can work on it. It's a lot more unstable, but it should last long enough to start. Okay.
Thanks.
We can get through now.
Ach, da oben steht ja auch noch einer. Okay.
We wanted to create an atmosphere of urgency in the Citadel, with Alex and the player focused on getting to the core to stop the impending collapse. Initially, we tried to reflect that urgency through Alex's behavior and acting. This proved to be unsustainable, however. If the player didn't choose to advance, Alex eventually ran out of lines or animations and was forced into her very non-urgent idle states. We found that the best approach was for Alex to have such implicit trust in and sympathy with the player that she's always content to proceed at whatever pace the player chooses. Once we adopted this principle, lines where Alex sounded impatient or frustrated with the pace of progress quickly stood out and were cut.
Ja, wie gesagt, das ist, wenn ich als Spieler keine Lust habe, mich hetzen zu lassen, dann lasse ich mich auch nicht hetzen, ganz einfach. Und dann geht mir irgendwann der NPC, der mich dann hetzt oder mich versucht zu hetzen, auf die Nerven. Das ist dann natürlich auch blöd, wenn es die direkte Partnerin im
We created a new Citadel destruction set of broken Combine panels and prefabs for the interior spaces to help make the Citadel look like it was on the verge of exploding. We also introduced a strong ambient orange color to help sell the fact that the Citadel was in a much different state from the last time the player passed through. The orange atmosphere was justified due to all the fires and smoke inside the Citadel.
Und mit Blau und Orange habt ihr es ja sowieso, sieht man. Oh, bloody hell. Hold on. So, ich hoffe, Mikrofon, Audio wird jetzt wieder aufgenommen. So muss ich dann hin. Ja, Mikrofon, Audio wird aufgenommen. Muss ich dann eben halt wieder cutten. Ja, Kollege hatte Probleme mit dem Audio. Soll ich morgen in die Werkstatt fahren? Hi. Huh.
Talk about unstable.
Haha.
I really don't think we should hang around.
Yep.
The primary goal of the first Citadel map is to communicate to players that the Citadel is falling apart. The Vortex was a late addition to the map, in an effort to beef up the idea that the Citadel was becoming a very dangerous place. We had particular difficulty in conveying the danger zone here. In early playtests, players thought that the entire bridge was dangerous at all times. Some additional effects work helped let players know where the dangerous areas were. We would have loved to base more gameplay on this Vortex idea, but we just didn't have the time.
Okay. So, hier müsste irgendwo auch wieder ein Ladescreen kommen. Eigentlich. Oder auch nicht.
We revealed the pod here to let players see it up close. At the same time, we didn't want players to get too good a look at what's inside. An old version of the scene had the pod simply hanging from the ceiling. It would burst open and then charge up your gravity gun, but not do much else. The current scene gives us a much more dramatic reveal of the pod, and an opportunity to introduce the mind blasts it's capable of emitting. Though they don't play a large role in Episode 1, these guys were a functional requirement of Episode 2, which meant we effectively had to ship a piece of that episode early.
Okay.
Oh, all right. Damn it, if that's what it takes. Just hurry. He's right behind me. Oh, shit.
What the hell?
Die sind doch relativ, ich sag mal, schlecht texturiert. Was man hier so sieht. Verficktes Mistvieh.
We decided this space needed to look unique and appear to have more significance than the rest of the Citadel areas the player had already traveled through, while at the same time feeling as though it was still made with Combine technology. This room introduces a story point that plays a big role in Episode 2, so the player has to feel like something important is going on in here. A different fog setting as well as different light styles and configurations helped achieve this.
The red lighting is a good contrast to the traditional blue-green colors of the Citadel.
Okay. Ja gut, kann man verstehen. Da wird ja einer der zukünftigen Gegner praktisch immer vorgestellt.
It's important that the player has some empathy for Alex, rather than seeing her as just a bullet-spitting robot. The brief recovery scene after the pod mind attack reminds the player that Alex is also affected by events in the world.
Psychologie. Das sind die kleinen Dinge, die einem, sagen wir mal, nicht direkt auffallen, wenn man nicht gerade mit der Nase drauf gedrückt wird.
Gordon? What's going on in there?
Ja, das kennen wir ja schon.
Hey, it's doing something to the gravity gun. It looks like it did in Breen's portal reactor. I'd say their security device backfired.
Pretty much.
Sure come in handy if it stays that way.
Yep. So, hier ist jetzt noch ein Ladescreen. Wann ging denn gleich das zweite Kapitel los? Ich sehe schon wieder, dass die Kapitel elende lang werden. Beziehungsweise die
The Lightbridge ball sockets are a clear example of our training approach to new gameplay elements. We train the players with a leading example, confirm they understand the concept, then switch up the problem set and make them use it in a new way. The first bridge shows players the solution. The second one confirms they understand it, and the third, knowing they understand the gameplay mechanic, challenges them in a new way using that mechanism.
Allerdings... Das war nicht. Oh, crap. Das ist ja so ziemlich das gleiche wie bei Portal. Schön mitgekriegt.
Impending destruction is a recurring theme in the Citadel. From a story, mood, and visual standpoints, this changes the Citadel. The destruction needed to feel natural rather than entirely scripted upon the player's actions. Not showing the destructive events dynamically makes the player assume the level of damage is static. However, if the events are too obviously triggered by player movement, the destruction feels too scripted. We found the solution was to give players glimpses of things that were happening at the periphery of the player space, as well as in their immediate vicinity, to give the feeling that stuff is happening whether the player is present or not.
Ja, das ist, alright. Der Auftrag. Klar, wenn es zu statisch ist, ist scheiße. Wenn es zu gescriptet ist, ist auch scheiße. Und dann jetzt Balance zwischendrin zu finden. Komm her, du verdammter Idiot. Ah! You suck. Get over here, wanker.
Having trained the player that balls fit into sockets, we wanted to introduce a puzzle where the question was how to get a ball into the socket. The puzzle we came up with involved a socket with an object blocking it, so that the player would have to ricochet a ball into place. This sounded simple until we actually tried to implement it. If we made the covering opaque, playtesters didn't realize that there was a socket behind it. When we made it translucent, they often didn't see it was there, and were confused when their shot bounced off. Making it movable was a red herring, making people think that they could actually knock it away. A couple of subtle art changes helped. We added some more prominent shadowing and made the glass panel flash when it was hit with a ball. Some playtesters consistently searched for a position to get a direct shot, which we didn't discourage as an alternate solution.
Okay, hold on. Ach. Aha. Das wusste ich zum Beispiel noch nicht, dass das geht. Beziehungsweise, dass das passiert. Dass die Glasscheibe so aufleuchtet. Weil von hinten passiert das nämlich nicht. That's interesting. Cool. Das wusste ich noch nicht. Krass. Huh. Ah, that's neat.
There are some little practical details that take a surprising amount of time and testing to get just right. For instance, it took us many playtests to figure out just how fast Alex should move. It turns out that her falling behavior looks and feels the best when she's moving faster than the player's normal speed, but slower than the player's sprint speed.
Aber trotzdem, das funktioniert, wenn sie einem folgt und nicht, wenn sie vorausläuft. Das ist das, was ich vorhin gesagt habe. Das ist dann Brühe. Gräbe. Oh.
This dropship scene was another case where we had to be clever about drawing the player's attention to something cool that was about to happen, which the player could easily miss if they weren't looking in the right direction. We used a solitary soldier firing at the player to draw their attention to where the dropship climbs into view. Once the player notices the dropship, there's a good chance they'll watch it until the payoff when it crashes.
Did you see that?
Okay, also dafür ist der Idiot da hinten zuständig, weil da verpisst sich dann nämlich einfach. Aha. Das ist auch cool. Ja, subtil. Subtil, aber wirksam. Ey. Спасибо, пожалуйста. Alter. Oder alles green? Das erste Kapitel ist noch mal ganz schön lang. Muss ich mal so sagen.
This is where some player training pays off. After earlier training players on the use of ball sockets, they get a sort of live fire test here starting the elevator. This is the beginning of the level's puzzle arc, where a basic gameplay mechanic is made increasingly more complex by layering other puzzle elements on it. The first puzzle only requires that the player find a combine ball and put it in the socket.
So that's easy enough. Thanks. Wie ist die jetzt belehrt? Спасибо. Bullet.
Here we're presenting the player with a now familiar ball socket challenge, but we're also bridging into some new training, showing the player that stalkers can destroy the combine energy balls.
Huh.
What's going on?
Hilfe. Oi, 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 oi. Ja, pretty much.
Late in development, we changed the art for these doors so that players understood they were entering the core area. It turned out that having Alex talk about the area wasn't enough to give playtesters the sense that they'd finally arrived at the core.
Ja gut, es ist aber auch eigentlich logisch, dass das für einen Kern generell anderes Design, was mehr, ich sag mal in Anführungszeichen, sicherer scheint, gewählt wird.
This could be it, Gordon.
Okay, direkter Eingriff. Das hätte ich mir jetzt auch denken können, dass hier aus dem Kapitel losgeht. Anyway, das war's für Folge 1 von Kommentar der Entwickler von Half-Life 2 Episode 1. Wir sehen uns dann im nächsten Kapitel. Bis dahin, macht's gut.